I didn't come from anything.
Yes.
I had my back against the wall, but I think that's where a true entrepreneur can be forged. Cash is king, content is queen. We are now in the content era. January 13, 2014, this boy took his own life.
Oh, no.
And
Welcome to the Xweet Spot, the podcast where we cut through the noise and bring you strategic, actionable insights to help your business scale and thrive. Whether it's finance, leadership, or marketing, we bring in top experts to share tips that you can implement immediately to drive growth and success. Today we are joined by Mel Yu, a personal development and business coach with a proven track record in building powerful personal brands and growing businesses. Mel is also the founder of Ego Expo, Australia's largest street culture expo, and an advocate for mental health and resilience in business. She has extensive experience working with businesses and leaders to unlock their full potential and achieve high impact results. Mel, you were the Young Australian of the Year nominee in 2019. You won the Channel 7's Young Achievers Award for social impact in the same year. You were the head of production for TEDx Melbourne in 2023. You are an international keynote speaker, owner of MCO Events, the most trusted event management company in Victoria that won Small Business Awards in 2021 and 2022. You are also a Lifeline Australia media ambassador and suicide prevention advocate. I think I'm going to run out of breath here. Mel, welcome to the show. What a delight to have you.
I am blushing because you've gone and done all of your research. That sounds like I'm like a superwoman, but I swear I'm not. I'm just an everyday human being. But yeah, thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very, very blessed to be here.
No worries. It's our pleasure. Thank you for coming to the show. Now, before we get into the real action steps business owners can take to start building their brand, let me ask you a simple but important question. What is branding and why is it important?
I think this question is such a loaded question because we talk about brand and everyone has their own little sentence around what it is, and you kind of end up being a bit more confused than when you started. But for me, put it very, very simply, branding is about reputation. It's what people say about you when you're not in the room. That to me is what brand is, and brand, when we talk about in a business sense, is a pairing of certain values, attributes, or other brands with your brand. Hopefully that makes
excellent. Oh, 100%. 100%. That was very well described. So should branding be a focus for businesses of all sizes, or there's a benchmark after which businesses can then turn into focus on branding?
So for me, branding comes first. It actually is the first and foremost thing that if you are a business owner or an entrepreneur and you're coming into the market, a lot of people go, okay, well, what's the name of my business, right? Or what's the logo that I'm going to create? And all of those are elements of branding, but not, I think, the foundational stuff. So where most people miss the mark, I think, is if you don't figure out what it is that you stand for or why your business exists, which is really brand, your reputation, how do you then build a sales and marketing pipeline around it? Brand is your purpose. It's your vision, it's your mission, it's the values, it's the things that you are, it's the things that you're not, it's identifying who that target audience is. And when I mentioned before about pairing, it's what do your audience and what do your customers like, and where do you sit within that? And so when we do branding strategy or development, it's quite a lengthy and long process because we do a lot of market research. We have a look at your competitors. We have a look at people that you're inspired by and what is the problem that you solve. We look at your services. All of that, I think, is the foundations of building a brand. And when we look at, for example, like building a house, you have to have the ground even before you build on top and before you build all of that infrastructure, because otherwise it's just going to collapse. And so I start with brand first. And I think if you nail brand right, you don't need to go through very expensive investments of rebranding because your brand didn't stick.
I wish I had you before, Mel. We rebranded
so many
twice.
people, yeah, but so many, and I have as well when we can talk about it. But like, I think when you start off, you go, okay, cool, like let's grab a logo, whip up some colors, away you go and launch, and then you need sales, you need money to come in to start building a business. And I think when you're starting out, brand is also not a priority. It's like, where do I find my next deal? Where do I get cash flow happening?
Right. Yes.
But if we take a little bit longer to just work out what the brand is, that becomes your anchor and your North Star, and you wouldn't get so confused along the way.
Excellent. So it's just not about the colors or the schemes you're using or the logo designs. It's so much more. Branding is your purpose.
If anything, what you just mentioned there are the external stuff, but if you don't get the internal, how do you even reflect the external?
Yes.
So your logos and your brand colors and your typography, that's not what really drives me when we talk about brand. The brand for me is like the essence of why you do what you do, so that people can find you but then buy from you because your why aligns with their why.
Excellent. Okay, that's great. So for businesses who have never invested any money in branding, right? What are some of the first steps they can take to start investing in creating a brand around themselves or elevate their existing business's brand?
For me, it's go get someone that loves and breathes and is obsessed with brand. But if you have a tight budget and you need to do it on your own, I also am a big advocate of like this big, amazing search engine called Google, and like going in and actually being like, how do I develop a brand? Enter. And I mean that like jokingly, but actually quite seriously in terms of like, we so quickly jump to how to make money rather than like, what is the pursuit of, and we were speaking about this offline, you can make all the money in the world, but then what? If you don't have a greater purpose, if you're not there to serve, you're going to get left feeling really short. And so when you're starting out, all you have is time and a passion and a dedication to do something. So use that time to kind of digest and unpack what it means to build a brand. And again, it comes back down to those vision statements, those values. What do we actually stand for as a company? Because if you can nail that, your hiring department becomes easier. Your marketing department becomes easier because everyone has a common goal. And then within that team, they're all driving towards that one goal because your brand is very, very clear about what it is that you stand for.
Excellent. That's great. That's great. So there's a lot of activities involved in creating a brand by the looks of what you mentioned as well. And these things might not give you instant gratification at first. So what are some of the key performance indicators to measure whether what you're doing is working or not?
Yeah. Brand almost always doesn't have a direct, exact ROI. If you let's look at a big brand like, say, Nike, okay? Them putting out a billboard, they don't necessarily go, we made X amount of money back from that one billboard. Or with athletes, they're very good at branding by association and pairing themselves with certain people that are already branded. Nike, just staying on that, they wanted to get into so many different industries, right? Football, soccer, tennis. They wanted to go into basketball. They wanted to go into all these different industries, but they couldn't break the market for a lot of different sectors until they really figured out their brand and then found these big athletes that paired them up to create even more power. So Michael Jordan and Nike naturally went on and sold millions and millions and millions of dollars for their shoes. And so I think when you talk about brand, figuring out who it is that you can leverage off and associate with, and get those values to translate to your brand.
So a KPI in this instance would be that if you're increasing followers maybe, or?
I think followers are a vanity metric though, to be honest.
Yes.
I feel like a KPI would be qualitative. Okay. So it can be people saying, I've seen you around. So brand awareness is coming out. just behind the cameras, we've got Raj over here, and when I jumped into the office, first thing he said was, "I see you everywhere." That is the power of brand, though,
Yes.
on a social media presence,
Yes.
on an omnipresence channel. So
Yes.
I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on YouTube, I'm on podcasts.
Yes.
It's that omnipresence of a brand, and not everything is going to get an instant ROI. However, you get qualitative data a lot verbally from people saying it, your impressions and the analytics behind your social media,
Yes.
definitely. An increase of followers is one metric, but not all of it, because people, especially on LinkedIn, I don't know about yourself, but you see a lot of content and you will be very conscious as an executive and higher up. You're very conscious of what you like.
Yes.
You might watch a lot of things, but
Yes.
you barely ever like anything.
Yes.
Does that mean that there hasn't been any brand presence or brand recognition? Not necessarily. It's just we're seeing it because everyone's always watching. And so what are you putting out there
Yes.
so that people are consuming it? It is a long-term game. I think branding is about an infinite game. It never ends.
Yes,
The
yes.
idea is to keep on playing and to
Yes.
never stop losing.
Yes.
So as your brand evolves, you'll realize, because I think qualitative measures are a much more subtle metric, but it shows that you're making an impact or having an influence.
They're powerful, though. They're very powerful. Great. Okay. So you mentioned that you're present everywhere. I noticed the same thing as well. And that's, when I looked at it, okay, when we were trying to find guests, I was like, okay, who am I going to get first? Let's just start with branding. And that's what I searched for. And I could find you everywhere on all channels, right? So I've got a leading question here. So people use a lot of social media platforms to elevate their brand. For someone who's starting out, which platform would you recommend? Or is there a way to determine which platform is the best platform for you?
Yeah. So I think that when I mentioned omnipresence, that's when I've sort of nailed certain milestones. If you are just starting out and you're stuck on choosing which platform, twofold. Either if you're B2C, if you're consumer focused, I'd say Meta, Instagram and Facebook are by far still quite the strongest platforms that everyone is on. Facebook is maturing as a platform, so is Instagram. But if you are B2C, I think Meta is still the strongest. TikTok, though, is naturally doing its amazing thing, but TikTok is the wild, wild west at the moment. And so you can go viral and you can hit virality very, very quickly. But in terms of community engagement, I still think Meta has a lot more weight. If you are B2B, so traditionally more working with businesses, then LinkedIn is your gold mine. And building a presence on LinkedIn is doing what Facebook is doing 5-10 years ago. The organic algorithm is very much in our favor. So your post can go to 5,000 impressions or views based on people that like your post. It shows it to their other person's network. So they're probably the two more the most main platforms. But I would start with just one. And I would nail one platform and get that really familiar and really comfortable and build a community there before you move into the next one. Because if you're going to try and be on every single platform all at the same time and you're just starting out, the reality is you're very ignorant to every platform because you don't have the skill set yet on what it takes to build out content, to post consistently, to even keep it sustainable. I feel like sustainability is such a underrated word. People go, let's just smash our content. I want to do 30 posts in 30 days. And then you know what happens? They disappear because they can't sustain it.
Yes.
And then they go for 3 weeks and then they come back on. And what that really tells your customer is that you're unreliable.
Yes.
And so if you can keep it sustainable, so if you're just starting out and you're like, you know what, 3 posts a week is all I'm going to be able to manage, start with 3, but do it for 3 months, 4 months, and then build it up to 4, build it up to 5. I don't think that you should go onto a second platform until you're making 6 figures.
Oh, excellent. That's a good metric.
Yeah.
Great. So you've created a lot of successful brands, right? And you've done it with multiple businesses. Tell me more about your journey. Where did you start? What were the challenges you faced and you had to go through? And how did you overcome those challenges?
How much time do we have, my friend? I think it is actually really important for your listeners to have a little bit more context. It's all good and well when we talk about brand building to look at the accolades and to look at the status. And especially for people that are starting out, you don't have status. So what you're trying to do is get credibility, build your brand, get some awards, everything that you kind of mentioned in my bio or my introduction. But brand for me is way deeper than that. And I would love to take this moment to share a bit about my story and my purpose.
Sure, go ahead.
So I grew up in a small town called Patterson Lakes. And for anyone else that's listening outside of Victoria, I call it like the Summer Bay of Victoria. It's very much palm trees, man-made lakes, keeping up with the Joneses. A lot of people have like boats, all that sort of rah. But in the 1990s, I was actually one of the only Asian families, Chinese families, within a very Western community. And so before I really recognized that I was meant to stand out, I was standing out based on the color of my skin. And that was my earliest trajectory of understanding like who I am in a world where I didn't necessarily feel like I belonged, okay? And so my parents divorced when I was 3 years old, and me and my brother had to manage that and navigate that. And growing up in school, same thing, kind of never really felt like I was never Asian enough to be Asian, but then I was never white enough to be Western. And so a lot of people that I think as immigrants can relate to not being able to belong in either communities.
Yes.
And so we forge our own path and we forge our own community. And then I was fascinated by psychology. So I loved relationships. I loved understanding the human brain. And that's probably because when my parents divorced, we didn't talk about it. Mental health isn't something that's talked about amongst many Asian communities. It brings shame onto the family. It's better to just get on with it and not talk about it.
That's right.
And unfortunately, that had its repercussions in making me feel like my parents' divorce was my fault, and that I didn't receive love how I needed to. Okay, and so as I grew up, I went to uni, I finished school, and I fell in love. And this story is really important because this really becomes part of my why. And I met a boy called Angus McIntosh. He was one of my first loves. And we were 18 to 23 and we took the world by storm, okay? It was like Bonnie and Clyde. He was my rock star. During, I think, those years, there's just so much partying for me anyway. We're dabbling in recreational drugs and alcohol, and we just kind of went a little bit off the rails a bit. But the love between us was so pure and genuine, and we did the first of everything together. So he was the person that I went overseas with for the first time. We built our careers, we bought our first cars, we moved in together, and that was the better of the 6 years of us coming together in this journey. And unfortunately, Angus had his demons as well, and I think our minds are so powerful. But January 13, 2014, this boy took his own life.
Oh, no.
And, he took his own life, and that was the fork in the road for me, where I, at 23 years old, planning my 23-year-old boyfriend's funeral, had to really ask, why am I even here? What is my purpose? While everyone was partying and started that, I started doing personal development because it was my saving grace. I started really figuring out and wanting to know why people can end up feeling so lonely and in such a dark place that they choose to end their own life. And that set me off on this really beautiful journey of my why. And I wanted to ensure that no one else went through the experiences that I went through. And so that initially started off as speaking about my truth and my lived experience and using my voice. And I started that in 2014 on Instagram. And Instagram became my dear diary, and it became my blog, and I just wrote and wrote and wrote, and I wore my heart on my sleeve. There was a real level of vulnerability in my writing, but what happened was people really gravitated towards the struggles, the happiness, the grief, the confusion, the blame, the shame, the guilt, and I wrote all of it as part of my journey. And over that, my following increased significantly because people were really tapped into, I think, something really genuine and raw and honest. And it impacted a lot of people. So that was the beginning. And then I found a lot of healing from when I wrote and when I shared. And so this isn't for everyone, but this is how my brand was built. It was built off, I guess, the sharing of the grief and the storytelling, and I would have other people give feedback and being like, thank you so much for putting what I couldn't say into words.
Wow.
And what I found was that you're about to release a book, but what I found is that when we can communicate, whether using our voice or our writing, there's a real power in that communication because we make people feel seen.
Yes.
And we make people go, oh my gosh, that really landed for me. These podcasts are really important because it could just take one conversation and someone goes, oh my God, like I needed that one little golden nugget, or I needed that one piece of advice or value, and I've changed the direction of where I'm going.
That's right.
And so that was 10 years ago. And so that ended up looking like I was part of the Victorian Royal Commission of Mental Health, and I really made it my purpose to stem the rates of suicide. And during that little break, I'm giving you guys a little bit, I'm wrapping up soon, but during that little break, I was suspended from psychology. So for 6 months, I wasn't allowed to work. It was the best thing that happened for me because I was very much like, let me get back on and deal with it.
Yeah.
But I was working with people in crisis, and I had just gone through a very significant traumatic experience. So you get suspended for 6 months. And during that time, I found a new passion and a new purpose in running events.
Wow. Okay.
And so I found that I just took a hiatus in psychology, but I found that I was able to still live in purpose and express through events. And events, if we look at it, is pretty much a bunch of people coming together with culture or value alignment.
Yes.
And so I loved building community, right? Coming from where I've been, I'm like, I just want people to not feel so alone.
Yeah.
And so I really found purpose in events and gatherings of people.
Yes.
And so that was where Ego Expo was born. It started off, so I had dabbled in the tattoo convention world. So I started off with my events experience with tattoos. And tattoos were such an interesting art form because I feel like it's about self-expression. And I worked on that business, grew it to a multi-million-dollar event space. We traveled around Australia. And in 2017, I basically hit a glass ceiling. I had done that for 4 years. And I thought, I'm going to go out and take the leap and start my own company. Never thought I was entrepreneurial. But yeah, I did that. And at the time, a lot of my friends and colleagues and sort of thing had e-commerce businesses. So a lot of people were starting streetwear, fashion brands, t-shirts, snapbacks, but you don't get to meet your customers face to face because it's all digital.
Yes.
And so me coming from an event background, I'm like, why don't I create a platform, an expo or a convention where 75, 100 of these e-commerce brands can come together and display their brand and to show why their t-shirt matters more than the other t-shirts. Why do we care about it? Because of the story that brand or that logo represents. And so in 2018, the brand called Ego Expo was born because there's more to us than meets the ego. There's more to us than meets the eye. And there's more to us than the clothes that we wear. There's also more to us than the little logos of symbols that we wear. But what does that mean? So that was my psychology background mixed with my events background, where I dived into working with hundreds of brands, hundreds of startup brands, and really helping them understand, what do you stand for? Because if you can convey what you stand for with the customer and the consumer, and they align with you, they will be a customer for life. That's brand building. That's when I said reputation, what people say about you when you're not even in the room.
Yes.
That's the power of brand, and that's where it started. And it's been 8 years now, 10 years now of running my own business and doing branding and marketing. But that's what I'm really, really fascinated about. And it all started with a really painful start, but I turned that pain into my purpose, and I made that mess into my message. And I'm really proud to share that story because I didn't come from anything.
Yes.
I had my back against the wall, but I think that's where a true entrepreneur can be forged.
Excellent, excellent. And it seems like every time you were dealt a bad hand, you turned it into this fuel to go the next step, elevate yourself, scale your business, or create businesses around it. So kudos to you. Well done.
I think every entrepreneur has like a little chip on their shoulder, whatever it is in their lives, but there's something out there that they kind of go,
right.
We're a bit crazy, us bunch of people that go out and go, I reckon I can do it.
Yes. And you got to have that, right?
Yeah, you do.
You got to have that. So, look, if you were to tell our listeners some action steps, right, that they can take right away to elevate their brand, what would those, let's say, 5 action steps be?
Get a mentor. I think finding someone, I made a lot of expensive mistakes. And I think if you can cut some of when you start, you have no idea what you're doing. Lean on someone within your space or sector, or that you aspire to be. Get a mentor to build your brand and start from there, start from the ground up. The second one is really just trialing and posting content. We are now, if cash is king, content is queen. We are now in the content era, and everything that we do is on these platforms called social media. So get out there and start promoting yourself and start trialing it, and you'll watch your brand evolve. It will change, especially personal brands. You're allowed to do it as many times over, but start posting content instead of just talking about it, analyzing it, doing a business plan. Like, you got to actually roll up your sleeves and get it done. The third thing would be, I think nothing triumphs like hard work, in terms of, and I don't just mean like, yeah, we work hard, like, but actually, like, what does that grit mean to you? If everyone's doing an 8-hour day and you want to be an entrepreneur, like, good luck trying to just do an 8-hour day or a 4-hour work week. I've never seen it. I've never seen it myself. I understand it. But when you're starting out, you have to work hard. Yes. The fourth, in terms of building a brand, is try and figure out how you can add value in society. Instead of it being transactional, or instead of it being, what can I get from this person, how can you show up and add value? How do you put your hand up and say, hey, I'm willing to be part of a podcast, or I'm willing to work for free even and build my skill set? And I think when you're starting out, you need to really work on serving first and let it come back to you after. But giving without expectation as well. Like, not, I'm going to do this podcast so that you then can later come and do this for me. It's just like, no, I'm very freely, willingly wanting to show up and add value.
Yes.
And so hopefully that's come through as well. So that's kind of 4. The 5th one would be to build your circle of influence on top of that. And what I mean by that in the adding value is, how can you create more and more influential people around you? We are the average of the 5 people that we keep, but I really mean that in terms of, if you hang out with drunks, drugs, alcohol, partying, even if you don't and you're sober, the association of that brand with the environment that you're in is going to impact you.
Yes.
If you hang out with people that are 5 a.m. run club, business owners, entrepreneurs, by association, you will slowly start attracting those qualities over to you.
Yes.
So who do you want to be? Where do you want to go? And how can you put yourselves in those rooms and build that circle of influence? Because a lot of business, one of the most powerful ones is word of mouth referrals, because it's $0 to acquire. It's relational capital.
Yes.
How can you build more relational and social capital? And so many, the best doors that open for me have just been friends or acquaintances or colleagues or something that have just gone, you should speak to Mel.
Yes.
And they cost nothing to acquire that lead.
Yes.
It's just about being a really good person. So go and build your circle of influence. That's how you'll create a more powerful brand.
Amazing, amazing. Well, thank you, Mel. It's been amazing and valuable to have you on the Xweet Spot. We'll include links to Mel's work and her podcast, The Authentic Me, in the show notes. So be sure to check those out. And until next time, keep pushing your business forward and go find your sweet spot.